Welcome to part two of our conversation with film television producer Mark Gordon. Mark is one of the most prolific producers in film and television today. His credits include Speed, Saving Private Ryan, Steve Jobs, and in television, Grey's Anatomy and Ray Donovan. In part one, we discussed the role of a producer and some of his early hits and misses. It's fascinating behind-the-scenes stuff about making films and making the deals that get them made. We begin part two talking about one of the most seminal motion pictures of our time, Saving Private Ryan. We hope you enjoy the show.
Okay,
Yeah.
Robert Rodat
Yes.
comes into your office, sends you a script. What happens? This is all the setup for Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, I read a script of Bob's. It was a script about, it was a Jekyll and Hyde script. And I really liked the writing, and I called his agent, and I said, look, I really like this script. Let's see if we could get this made, which we did years later as a television film. And I said, and I'd really like to meet Bob. I'd like to work with Bob on an original. So Bob came over to my office, and we talked a little bit, and I liked him, and he really knew film, and I've got a pretty good vocabulary of old films and directors. I'm a student. I went to film school. I've seen a lot of movies, and I love movies. And so I said to Bob, listen, why don't you come over once every week or two? We'll sit for an hour, and I'll throw some stuff out at you, and you throw some stuff out at me, and let's see if we can find something to do together. Which, by the way, I still work that way with writers. And we had 2 or 3 meetings, and we both were like throwing out our crap to each other, and nothing stuck. Then one day he came into my office, and he said, I read this story in a historical journal. There were 4 brothers. They were, and it was basically the story that you see. 4 brothers, two were killed on on a ship in the Pacific, and one brother was killed in somewhere else, and the 4th brother was MIA, or they didn't know where he was, somewhere a couple days after.
Do you know where the original story emanated from?
I was getting to that, but
I know. Okay.
I live in Waterloo, Iowa. It is the home of the 5 Sullivan brothers.
Right.
And that is what the story is. Now, in actuality...
This is actually another story.
Well, it's another story, but I mean, it was the sort of inspiration.
No, it wasn't. It was there were actually 4 brothers, and I can't remember their names, who were not the Sullivan brothers, and ultimately we decided to change enough that we needed to fictionalize it. But there were actually 4 other brothers. The Sullivan brothers are the famous brothers who, all died
on one ship, the Juno.
On one ship, and
right.
that's why they didn't put everybody in the same.
But that is quoted in the movie, isn't it? Is it not, that sort of policy?
Yeah. Yes, it is. And the idea was, and this mother's going to get the news, and we got to save the 4th brother. He goes, what do you think? I said, I think it's the best idea I've ever heard in my life. It was just sort of like, I can see the movie, I can see the trailer, I can see the poster, and then I'll tell you what I couldn't see, because no one wanted it. We took the pitch out to every studio in town.
Was there a script yet, or no, just the pitch?
We just pitched it, because at the time, I wasn't in a position to pay him, and he needed to be paid. He wasn't in a position to write it on spec. So literally every studio passed. And we were like stunned. I thought this was the best thing I had ever seen. And everybody said, we don't want to do a World War II movie, and nobody's interested. I said, you're crazy, but okay. So after we got rejected everywhere, I picked up the phone and called an executive at Paramount who we'd pitched it to. I said, look, just pay the guy scale. Could you please? I'm telling you, this is great. He'll do it for nothing. But he's got to get paid, because he's got a family, and you got to pay him. So I finally got Paramount to agree. And what I said to Bob was, look, they're not paying you that much anyway. This has got to be great. We can't show it to anybody until it's great. So I know that, you're supposed to turn it in 12 weeks and, you've got a thing. I said, I'll make sure that you don't have to turn it in until we both agree that it's good. And I'll let you do whatever you want to make other money so that we don't have to turn it in so you can take something else. So it took a year more. And he would write a draft. He's a very fast writer. He would write a draft, and I'd go, it's not good. He would write another draft. He must have written 10 drafts. But more importantly, it would be like, we find Saving Private Ryan on page 30, and the movie is about the journey back. They get to Ryan, Ryan's dead. I mean, we had all these different versions of the movie, and we kept going, nah, that's not it. No, that's not right. We could still use some of the material in between. And finally, we had a draft that we were mostly good with. And so we turned it into Paramount, and they said, that's pretty good. I said, it's great. And they said, well, it's pretty good. I said, well, you going to make it? Well, we don't know. And I didn't have a lot of money at the time. And I said, I'll buy it back from you. And they said, no, we don't need the money. We'll, if you can put the movie together in an interesting way, we'll consider it. So I'm on the phone. It's like nothing's happening. And I get a call from Richard Lovett, who is the head of CAA now, was an agent at CAA at the time. And I think he was the head of the agency back then. It's been a while. And he goes, look, Tom Hanks read the script. I had actually called him, and another agent over there had called, and he likes the script. Would you meet with him? But you can't tell anybody. Now, this was when Tom Hanks was the biggest star in the world. I said, okay. So I go have lunch with Tom. He's very excited about it. He says, would you mind if I gave it to Steven Spielberg? I said, no, I wouldn't mind.
No, you wouldn't. Steven who?
Well, okay, if you must.
What's he done?
Exactly. So he said, I'm going to give it to Steven. I think he'd really like this movie. So he gives it to Steven. I get a call. Now I'm still not allowed to tell anybody at Paramount. I get a call. Steven wants to do it. The same day, I get a call from Paramount. Great news. This director wants to do it.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
And I said, they said, we want to get into a deal with him right away. And I can tell you that, let me put it to you this way. If you've ever heard of this director, you sure as hell haven't heard of his name in 20 minutes, in 20 years, or however long it's been. I said, don't do that. And they said, well, why not? I said, I can't tell you, but just believe me when I tell you I can do better. And then, of course, you tell somebody that. It's like saying, I'm not going to tell you the secret. They're like, what is it? 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 And I'm thinking, I can't blow this. I said I wouldn't tell, and I'm not going to tell because I know how things go. So I don't tell. Finally, it all comes out. And what I really want to say to the people at Paramount is, hey, fuckers, you wouldn't believe in this script, and look what I did without your help. Of course, then I had to call the other director and his agent because he was a friend of mine as well. And I had to say, look, I'm really sorry. I know you wanted to do this, and I know we were having, initial conversations, but Steven Spielberg wants to do the movie, and I hope you understand that I picked him. And the guy was very gracious. He said, I understand, and his agent was, I get it, but I felt bad about it. And that's how that movie ended up getting made.
Well, hopefully they got Bob Rodat got a little bit more for his effort.
Yeah, he got paid because they made the movie, so ultimately he did get paid, and he also was nominated for an Academy Award.
So, okay, so let's go. So that's the process of development. Let's go the production of that movie, especially the beach scene, is so iconic. The storming of Normandy is unbelievable. Were you there when they were shooting that?
I wasn't, not because I couldn't be or didn't want to be, but I believe at the time my wife was having a baby and I couldn't leave.
But you're seeing the dailies?
I'd like to interject something. My uncle Homer, my dad's brother, landed at Normandy, and he was speechless during the film.
Well, what's interesting about the movie is that, people will say, well, was that in the script? And I say, yeah, 2 pages of it. You can't write 20 pages of an action scene in a script. But I will tell you that the first time I met Steven, I don't know where he was, but it was myself and Tom and Bob, and we drove to Steven's house. And this is when, there was no Zoom, there was none of that. But Steven had one of those things in his house where you could talk to each other. It wasn't very good quality. But we had a meeting. He was in New York or Europe or I don't know where he was. But what he said was, let me tell you something. When I shoot that beach scene, people are going to think that they were there. He said, people will not have ever seen anything like what I'm going to do in that opening sequence. And let me tell you, we all saw it.
How long did it take to shoot that whole beach scene?
Not very long, considering how long it is on the screen and how difficult it was.
Amazing.
I mean, the thing about this man is that you watch him work. He is a savant. I mean, whether you like all of his movies or some of his movies, he is a master like I've never seen before. And I've worked with some very impressive directors over the years. He doesn't have to prepare the way other directors prepare. He has it in his head.
Is he bringing a shot list?
I never saw one. I'm sure he had one.
All right, but it's in his head.
But he's like, he knows what he wants. He knows what he's doing. He works with the same people. It was an interesting experience for me because I had spent a year where it was just me and Bob. And we were making the movie over and over and over again on the page. And then when Steven came in, it was like, thank you, but I'm going to go off and make the movie. You're welcome to come and visit. But he didn't need me. And, I got it. There were no expectations. I didn't think I would be saying, oh, maybe you should move the camera over here, or I don't think you have it, Steven.
Or the fire's not big enough.
Yeah, the fire's not big enough, exactly. And so, I made the choice to not go and stand around like a tourist because I had other movies that I was making and I had other work to do. But I did visit a couple times, and he was lovely and he was gracious. And it was an incredible experience. And then, of course, I got to know him a little bit. And we haven't made another movie since then, but he has been a friend personally and otherwise, and we have worked on a couple of things that ultimately didn't get made. But he's a master.
Well, not only is he a master, Ian Bryce, who was a co-producer on that movie.
He was a producer on it.
He was a producer on the movie. Who I remember at one of your parties, I was talking to him, and they were doing Saving Private Ryan. And I asked him about the experience. And he said to me, Steven Spielberg is amazing that if he says, it would be great tomorrow if we had a cloudy day.
Yeah, right.
And the next day it's a cloudy day. Well, or he would say, it would be good. I want to get this shot at the cemetery. It would be great if we could find a tombstone that said Private Ryan on it. And they found it.
Well, and Ian and I had done 2 other movies prior to the time that he came on Saving Private Ryan. We did Speed. He was the line producer on Speed, and then he was the line producer on another Graham Yost movie, the 3rd Graham Yost movie that I did, called Hard Rain, which nobody really saw, but was an interesting experience. And I think, Ken, you and I talked about it a little bit. But again, just to go back to Saving Private Ryan, it was even Steven, who, you know, knew that he had made a wonderful film, and we all saw the film, and it was fantastic. I don't think anybody really had the idea that it would have such a profound effect on men who had been in the military.
Yeah.
Whether, you know, specifically the Second World War, but anybody in battle. It was I have been very lucky over the years to have been involved in some movies and television experiences that became cultural phenomenons. Saving Private Ryan was one. And it changed the way people in the service were able to talk to their families and friends about war, because it was the first time that they felt that in some way war, particularly the Second World War and the Normandy invasion, was depicted in a way that was so horrific and visceral that they could feel like they had something that they could use to talk about it.
What my uncle said was it was almost the stylistic aspect of the deafening, the lack of sound.
The sound,
So
yeah.
that was the most realistic to him.
Yeah.
Is all this stuff is going on. It's massively explosions, but you
It's like
almost
you're deaf.
become deaf. All
Yeah.
you see is
Yeah.
what's happening. And he said that was the most realistic part of the beach
Sound
scene.
design was amazing. It was amazing, and that movie, just that section of the movie, is worthy of a whole conversation on its own. And
Yeah.
it was all Steven. I mean, it was just that whole experience was a pure filmmaking.
But that was, and not to belabor it, but that was inspired because Stephen wasn't a soldier. He didn't land at Normandy, but to understand that this is going to shut off your senses, this experience, that's
Well-
what a lot of soldiers related to.
Yeah, and he did it, and he does his homework. You know, he really does his homework. I mean, he is, again, you like his movies, or you like some of his movies, or you don't like a movie that he's made in a while. The man is not a human being. He's a movie god. He's just amazing.
And did he win the Academy Award for directing?
He did. I didn't.
I know, which was my point, which is where I was going.
Yeah, well, it was very disturbing, especially because, you know, Saving Private Ryan and Shakespeare in Love, I started to stand up because, I mean, of course we were going to win. It was very depressing. I have to say that it was so painful at the moment. My heart was broken.
Would you say, well, you're not the first person to get fucked by Harvey Weinstein, apparently, because that's who you lost to.
I like that. I don't know what you mean, but I like the way you're saying.
But that was the first time where they were talking about Harvey Weinstein was able to lobby based on the amount of money he would spend promoting Shakespeare in Love to the industry. And by doing that, he was able to buy the award. Is that possible? Is that really accurate? Is that people will be swayed by advertisements?
So here's how it works. The Academy is made up, as you know, of different disciplines. Directors of photography, costume designers, production designers, all the different, I think there are like 25 different categories for the Academy. But by far the largest are the actors. And there is if you look at historically the Academy Awards, many times Best Pictures have been won by movies that really were actor movies. Shakespeare in Love was the ultimate actor movie. And so what Harvey did was he would throw these parties. He would throw these parties for old actors. I mean, it's a little bit like the Hollywood Foreign Press. You have a movie, you invite them, you wine them, you dine them. It's like a junket almost, where if you're promoting. When we were opening Murder on the Orient Express, we took all these reporters on the Orient Express. I mean, it cost hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars. I mean, I don't know what it cost, but it was a fortune. But you create this thing, and they spent a fortune wining and dining all these people, particularly the actors. And so, did he buy it? What happened was that the level of money that he spent was crazy. And after that, there was a real tension with how much money people should spend and whether you could do this or whether you could do that and what you could and couldn't do as far as promoting your picture to the Motion Picture Academy, to the members. So, yeah, he was aggressive, and he bought it.
All right, moving off of this one.
Christian?
Here's a movie that Mark made in 2004, and right now is so incredibly relevant, which is The Day After Tomorrow.
You know, again, I give all the credit to the director. Roland Emmerich had this idea, and he had written a script himself, and it wasn't great, and he knew it, and he brought it to me and said, look, I love this story. I've got this script. What do we do? And
But was it driven by a real thing? Like Al Gore back in the day was talking about climate change.
No,
Nobody was talking about climate change then.
They were, but it wasn't.
He had it before Al Gore became. Here's the thing about Roland. If you look at his movies, he is very ahead of the curve when it comes to, he made Independence Day. He made 2012. He made The Day After Tomorrow. He's a zeitgeisty guy. I hate that word, but he is. He really is a guy who's very tuned in, and he was really interested in it. And the other thing about Roland is that he's a very, very intelligent, sophisticated guy. He's one of the most well-read people I know. Now, his movies are not particularly sophisticated. They're pop movies. But the ideas behind them are very thoughtful, and he's always trying to make things that are interesting and curious questions about the world put into a very, what he would say is a Spielbergian world, which is, I don't want to say the lowest common denominator, but
go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Anyway, the point is, he brought me the script. I said, yeah, you're right. The script isn't great. Let's hire another writer to rewrite and reinvent your script. I brought in a writer who I knew, who I had done some work with, Jeffrey Nachmanoff, and the three of us talked and developed the script that Jeffrey wrote and Roland wrote-ish. And then we went out to the town with it, and everybody in town wanted to make it. And it was one of these great situations where we had a script. We knew what the movie was going to cost. And we said, okay, who wants it? If you want this is what it's going to cost. This is how much you have to pay us. And you're not allowed to give any script notes. You have to accept the script as it is, which, by the way, was fantastic because they didn't have a contractual right to give notes. The notes that they gave us were fantastic. But they didn't give us 9,000 stupid notes, which people feel the necessity or obligation to do.
But you were leveraging coming off of Saving Private Ryan and all your other successes.
It wasn't about me. It was
Okay.
It was about Independence Day and Fox, and it was about The Patriot, which wasn't as big a hit. But it was, that was a pure Roland movie, and nobody makes those movies better than he does.
Although his titles I don't love.
You don't like the
I
Day
still.
After Tomorrow?
No,
Day After
I
Tomorrow.
asked it.
Although I keep
but I don't
confusing that-
understand. Why couldn't it have been a week from Thursday?
It could have been, except
my
that
point.
would have been a movie that Shecky Green was in.
Okay, so then let me ask you another question. Now that we look at his other movie, 2012, doesn't
Yeah.
it seem a little dated in 2020?
It did, but it made him almost $1 billion. So
Well,
what the hell?
you said in the beginning it's not about the money,
It isn't, but unless it is.
unless it is.
Unless it is. Hey, I'm going to interrupt. Can I interrupt with a question?
Sure.
And it's completely different than what we've been talking about. All right? All right? And we can come back to this.
Sure.
But I got to ask you a question because you went to NYU, with Ken.
That's how I
I'm in
met.
college. I'm in college at Northwestern Film School, same time.
Yep.
Tuition, room, and board was about $14,000 total, everything. Now tuition alone at NYU, Northwestern,
$50 grand.
$50,000.
Yeah.
Room and board, it's 80 grand or 90 or 100 to go to college per year.
It's insane.
My son wants to be an actor. He went to the academy, $50,000 a year. Well, given that it's so expensive to go to college, and at the time, the basic paradigm was to study film theory,
Yep.
craft, and the people that we got to know studying film theory and craft became the nucleus of those people that we worked together and started our careers. You know,
Right.
I'm happy to say that Brad Hall, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, those were my people, and we formed careers. But my entire bill was $70,000 when I graduated, paid it off in a year.
Right.
What would you say to someone now looking at film school or a liberal arts school? Do you spend $200,000 or do you start making YouTube videos?
Well, what I would say is that putting aside the cost, because not all schools are, you can go to a state school and there's some great ones, depending upon what state you live in. And by the way, as we know, the thing that affects us more than anything, it's not the institution, it's the individual teacher that you have that either inspires you or teaches you or makes you feel like anything is possible. So let's just put the cost aside. I do not recommend film school to people. And the reason that I don't recommend film school to people is because I think to a large extent, what film school, the thing that's important in any kind of movies or television is, what are you telling a story about? What life experience do you have? What have you read? Do you know history? Do you know English? Have you read great plays? And the thing about film school is that unless those things are also interesting to you, you have a year's worth of liberal arts to get rid of your math and science and whatever your requirements are for that particular major. And then everything else is film. So what are you learning? You're learning how to make films, but you're not learning about life. You're not learning about art. You're not learning about history. And these are all things that are the things that you tell stories about. And that's what being a filmmaker is a storyteller.
No, you're absolutely right. The thing that I would say for me, and to you as well, I think to a certain extent, I had no relationships in the film business when I wanted to get into the business. NYU did offer me friendships, you obviously, and other people, that as we all kind of went out, having that connection did help us kind of.
I agree. I'm not saying
those relationships did help keep me in the business.
Yes, but I think
Renee got me my job at MTV. Renee was my friend at NYU.
I know, but you would have found your way. What I would say is that too many people come out of film school, and there was a whole sort of years and years of it where so many of these films were like all visual and no substance, and they were all about. People were telling stories about things that maybe people didn't care about, or it was style over substance. So again, very. I had a very good experience in film school because I didn't know anything, and it was good for me to
Right, that was me too.
learn basics. And I also spent a year at Boston University doing most of my liberal arts credits. Took a year off, and then went back and finished NYU in 2 years. So I really got through college in 3 years because I wanted to work. So did I learn things in, you know what I learned in film school? The appreciation of cinema. The technical aspects and the practical aspects, you know, you learn more as a production assistant, you know, in 3 weeks on a TV commercial than you do in film school. But unless you're, you know, I don't know, that was me. Everybody has a different experience.
Well, yeah, but today, go ahead, Gary. I'm sorry.
Well, you know, I'm looking at my son and his friends, and they're doing TikTok videos and they're doing YouTube videos.
Right.
You know, I'm looking at they have applications to edit their own films, sound and score. The camera they've got is actually terrific. Yeah. You know, it's 4-chip, and so they're making movies and they're telling stories. They're disposable in a sense, but they're doing it. And I feel like they're learning craft, and I feel like they're learning to tell stories because they make so many of them so quickly. Their trial and error is like the Beatles in Hamburg. They're failing in real time. Yep. And learning their craft. So I'm just kind of feeling if I'm going to spend $200,000, I just as soon give it to the kid. Go make movies, kid, with your friends.
I agree with you, but what I would say is, just to go back, is but make sure that from an educational point of view, he's reading books.
Exactly.
He's reading the classics. He's studying Shakespeare. He's going to the theater. He's looking at films that were made before 1990. You know, right. For him, that's an old movie.
But that's exactly. And I don't even.
There were none of this. We didn't have any. There were no phones. There were no. You know, it didn't exist. There were no cell phones back then.
There were no ATMs when I was in college.
I had an outhouse in the backyard. We had no plumbing in the house.
We used the Sears catalog as toilet paper.
Exactly.
Well, that was an important question to me, and thank you for that answer. I appreciate it.
I think it's a good question.
Does the name of the college on somebody's resume mean anything to you?
No.
Me either.
Not even a little bit. You know, I did have people in my company who were like, "Oh, they went to Harvard. Who gives a shit?" You know, I barely look at a resume because, especially if you're hiring somebody as an assistant in an entry-level position, which is when you have a resume, so to speak, it's like I look at it really to see if they've worked with anybody that I know. But otherwise, it's like, who are you? What are you interested in? And are you interesting to me? And do I want to spend, 10 hours a day with you locked up in an office? Are you going to make me laugh? Are you smart? Are you funny? Are you going to challenge me? Are you going to read scripts and give me good thoughts? Are you going to, be good to hang around with? And, look, people will say, well, why do you think you were successful in the movie business? I worked my ass off. I'm reasonably intelligent. I've got a good sense of story. I learned and I worked hard and I put in my 10,000 times 10 hours. But it's because I refused to say die. And by the way, there are plenty of people who can fulfill the same requirements that I just said, who didn't get lucky either, because all of that, and you still need to get lucky.
Well, I'm going to throw this out.
And I'm not the only one who says this. Hard work is more valuable than talent in certain things. Look, if you're a writer, you got to be able to write. But there are plenty of mediocre directors who just really wanted it badly enough. There are plenty of producers who don't have. They just work hard. They outwork.
I'm going to say, and this is just going to sound like, I guess a bunch of old people going way back when. But the reason I got into this business, and I think the reason that you got into this business, and probably Gary too, is because we all got a passion for the business.
Yeah.
And the reason we got that passion is because we sat in a movie theater in anticipation of the lights coming down and the curtain opening. And us getting swept into this story and falling in love with that. That experience right now is not available
Well, that's true.
And
And
so
by the
I'm saying,
way-
and I don't know where you're going to get that passion. Are you going to get that passion for making a movie or storytelling? That same experience because you're binge watching on Netflix? Are you
On
going to get
Netflix,
that
on
same
your home
passion for the love of it if you're
I think
making
so.
YouTube
I think you
videos?
can.
Okay.
I think you can, and I'll tell you why. Because when we were younger, we had movies and we had 3 networks.
Three
ABC,
states.
CBS, and NBC. And the reason it was called broadcasting was because it was a net for a broad audience. And so everything in television was almost exclusively for middle America that would reach the and when I say the lowest common denominator, I don't mean stupid people. I just mean as many people as possible, okay? And when we went to see a movie, and I grew up in Newport News, Virginia. We didn't have art films. We didn't, you grew up in Iowa. I promise
Iowa.
you there were not a lot of art cinemas there. You
No.
weren't seeing Godard as a, 14-year-old. So we were watching,
Fritz the Cat. That's what I was going
James
to.
Bond movies and
I am curious,
Our
fellow.
Man Flint and the Disney movies, but we weren't seeing high art or particularly sophisticated
Yeah,
work.
but it was escapist. It was going into a whole new
Yeah, but
world.
my point is that what's different, we're not sitting in a movie theater where the curtain comes up, but young people are now seeing stories because they don't need as big an audience to narrowcast programming to people that is much more sophisticated intellectually, emotionally, speaking to those young people and telling stories that they can really relate to. So it's not the same, but it's different. And I would argue that it's neither better or worse. It's just different.
Right.
Is this the end of the Cineplex? We'll get Mark's answer to that question, the future of television, the making of the film Steve Jobs, working with Aaron Sorkin, and what's Patrick Dempsey really like? As a matter of fact, the conversation went on so long, I had to leave because of a family commitment. So I'm curious to hear this show myself. Stay tuned for part 3 of our conversation with film and television producer Mark Gordon. And please, tell your friends. Thanks for all your support.